Welcome back, everybody. We've been broadcasting from the Desmond Tutu Refugee Reception Center in Marabastad in Tshwane this morning. The Home Affairs facility offers documentation services to asylum seekers and refugees in Gauteng. Following the recent violence and looting in the province, hundreds of undocumented foreign nationals were arrested, raising concerns over migration management in the country. And before the ad break, Sakina spoke to Sharon Ekambaram, who is the head of Refugee and Migrants in South Africa. And in response to that, we are joined from our Parliament studios by the Director General in the Department of Home Affairs, Thulani Mavuso. A very good morning to you, Mr. Mavuso. Thank you so much for joining us and welcome to Morning Live.
Good morning and good morning to the viewers.
I'm sure you've been watching and listening to the interaction between Sakina and the various stakeholders in the Migrant Management Center, and in particular the head of Refugees and Migrant Rights at Lawyers for Human Rights, and of course a representative of the South African Police Services. Now, we've been highlighting the difficulties of getting asylum papers in South Africa, and we also spoke to Hassan, a refugee from Burundi who's been coming to the center for the past 15 years. Now, this is a potential breeding ground for corruption and bribery, as has been alleged by some of the asylum seekers who, to speed up the process. Now, the head of Refugee and Migrant Lawyers at Lawyers for Human Rights want you to take us into your confidence to tell us how is the department dealing with issues of bribery at the Desmond Tutu Refugee Reception Center?
Well, let me put this thing into context. First and foremost, we know that the asylum seeker management system was created for people who are being persecuted from countries of origin. And a number of people who are applying for asylum in this country are not people who are persecuted from their countries of origin. Actually, if we look at the statistics, about 5% gets actually approved as refugees in this country. 95% gets rejected, that their claims are actually unfounded, because they are not falling within the category of people who are seeking protection in the country. I will indicate that, for an example, in 2008, we had an unprecedented number of 207,000 people seeking asylum in this country. While the system was not created for such huge numbers, because when we actually created the system in 1998, they envisaged that was a number that we were going to be dealing with was in the region of about 30,000 people, because looking at the instability within the continent. But when there was the economic meltdown in 2008, we saw a huge number of people who were moving down south looking for economic opportunities. And because they could not qualify for any type of visa, then they abused this particular system. They clogged the system, and then those who are actually vulnerable, who are supposed to be protected, are now suffering because you've got people within the system who are not supposed to be there. So that is a challenge that we need to be dealing with. And secondly, that we cannot be expanding and opening hundreds of refugee reception offices when we know that the resources that we have are actually limited. Now, I hear people raising the issue of Cape Town. We are going to be reopening the refugee reception office in Cape Town as instructed by the court. But the reality is that in South Africa, there are now people who arrive, through the sea who are seeking asylum, like you would have in Europe. Most of the people who are seeking asylum in this country, they come from the north. I can safely say that between 2008 and 2009, combined, there were over 440,000 people who applied for asylum. But the number has been dropping. That center in Marabastad, for an example, we installed what we call an automated booking system terminal, where people who are still waiting for their cases to be heard by the Refugee Appeals Board, they automatically renew their own papers without seeing an official, because we're trying to cut the issues of corruption. So they can be able to renew their Section 22 permit. And obviously, those who are new, then they can be able to go to a terminal and make a booking. Now, yes, there are issues relating to corruption, and we admit to that place is infested, because you then have people who are syndicates who then try and extort money and say they will renew documents for people. For an example, I know someone was complaining that people from West Africa on Thursdays, when they're supposed to go there, they're no longer going there. Reason being that a majority of them, they have gone through the refugee status determination officer. We said they don't qualify. They took their matter to the standing committee on refugee affairs. They don't qualify. They took their matter to the Refugee Appeals Board, the Refugee Appeals Board rejected, and then the judicial review also rejected. So I think let's talk as one country and say, let's not allow people who are not supposed to be in that system to abuse it. Let's extend it to those who qualify for it.
All right, Mr. Mavuso, thank you so much for your time and for your feedback. That was the Director General in the Department of Home Affairs, Thulani Mavuso, speaking to us live from our Parliament studios. He was reacting to allegations of corruption in the Home Affairs Department, particularly at the Desmond Tutu Refugee Reception Centre in Marabastad in Pretoria. And that's a wrap of this morning's